Hey everybody, it is Paul Allen Clifford with ChurchTechCast.com. I'm trying to see exactly what's going on because the stream almost looks like it's not working. Let me go ahead and I'm going to restart everything in case... Oh, I do see it, and so we'll call that good. Let's see if I can hear myself. I can hear myself locally, but I don't know about remotely. Well, I might just get going because I'm kind of on a bit of a tight schedule today. My younger sister just had a baby, and so I'm an uncle for the first time. I haven't had a niece or a nephew before, and now I have a nephew. So I'm going to visit her this weekend, and I have still got a lot of stuff to do. So let's, I'm going to just shut down that window altogether. Maybe open the chat window. There's the local chat, which references the remote, so that should be okay. And we'll go from there. So this is the ChurchTechCast.com streaming show, streaming bandwidth provided by worship channels. Visit them online at worshipchannels.com. Live streaming made simple. Okay. I have a few different questions. Some were sent to me directly and some not so much. So let's get going on that. The editor for my books is actually my wife's cousin, and when I announced one of my previous shows, actually it was Technobabble, yesterday, she asked, hey, have you talked about website backgrounds yet? So I thought that I'd talk about those real quick. One thing that I've noticed is most people should not put a picture as their website background. There are good ways to do it, but you have to be a fairly decent designer to do it. And for whatever reason, people tend to default to a picture background. So here are some of the problems with that. First off, different screen sizes. So you get either a picture that's blown up and gets a little fuzzy, or you get a picture that tiles and it looks kind of silly because it doesn't tile well. A lot of times you'll have, say, 75% of the screen covered with the picture, and the other 25% it's looping horizontally and it's looping vertically. So you end up with parts of 3 copies of the picture and the main picture. So I find that a little annoying. You can go into Photoshop and make it loop better, but what I would do personally is I would create the background and have it fade to a solid color around the edges and then have the solid color as your main background. So that kind of gets around that problem, but it doesn't get around this other problem, which is what she was really asking about. Is she goes to a website that has a solid pink background and there's not enough contrast between that and the text. I'd say the text is probably a light color as well, and so she has difficulty reading. So make sure if you're using a pattern, background picture, or if you're using even a solid color, that what you do when you're doing that is you provide plenty of contrast. That really matters in websites because the text is the most important thing. Now there are exceptions to that rule. Let's say that you were trying to make something illegible for some artistic reason. That would be an example. The text needs to be legible. So refer to yesterday's Technobabble to talk about fonts, because while web fonts are much more limited, I still see people trying to get around the limitation of web fonts and using title fonts as body fonts. So that's a problem as well. Bo Brotherton on Church Technical Leaders asked, why would our leaders want to take space away from our current building and dedicate it for a control room? What would be in it for our leaders to do this? I know that we would be able to stand and better communicate with each other, but is this the only reason? So I wrote back to Bo, having been through this exact same struggle with the leaders at my church, and here's what we went through. First off, they did want us to be in the room, but in order to communicate with the camera people, I have to whisper. And that creates one of two distractions. Distraction one, I don't whisper quietly enough, and then people can hear me, so that distracts them. Distraction number two, I do whisper quietly enough, but then the camera people can't hear, so I can't take a shot. So then I don't get the shots that they want. So either way, that's distraction one and distraction two. Secondly, a good reason to do this is if you are in another room, then you can't fool yourself into believing, well, I'm adequately covering the room. I can see everything, because you're using your eyes to see everything and not looking at the screen or not looking at your program monitor. But if you're in another room, you don't have that problem. There's no way that you can kind of trick yourself into believing that, because if you don't see it on a screen, it can't be on the screen. So that's the second thing. Thirdly, there's some concern, especially amongst worship leaders and other people, that you won't be engaged if you're not in the room. And while that might be the case for some people, for those of us who are called and gifted to sit in the director's seat, to serve in that way, it's actually more fueling for us to be in a control room. Because first off, we're doing what we are made to do. Secondly, we're thinking thoughts about the details of the service that help pull us in. So I'm thinking, how can I make this more engaging? Is this a good time to take a closer shot so that we get more emotion? And I'm not distracted by that. I'm helping. I'm worshiping in the same way that a guitarist is as they're stepping forward for a solo and doing their best to praise God through it. So you see how that's totally different. Additionally, if you are in a video room, you have dedicated monitors or a multi-viewer on a large plasma, whatever, and you can see the room in more ways, in more perspectives than anyone else. And it really engages your heart. Now, I speak as someone who, we had someone leave when we opened our current building, and so I was the only director for about 18 months solid. So I never missed a service, and not only did I never miss a service, I was never actually in the sanctuary. And I was fine with that. So keep that in mind. Someone else has pointed out a couple other things. First off, security. You can keep some of your most expensive video equipment stored behind locked doors. That's great. Another thing is when you are in the sound booth, which by necessity must be in the room, whoever came up with the crow's nest above the sanctuary behind a wall needs to be shot. That's not a good way to do sound. But if the audio is in the room, people will come up and talk to you. And while it's not bad to talk to people, what is after service, rush out to talk to people. That's absolutely a necessary piece of the puzzle. but people sometimes feel it's necessary to give you hints, and they're not on the team that should give you the hints. They just have preferences. So someone who's not on any team comes in and says, hey, yeah, I'm really good at thus and so I really think you should do it this way, which is fine, except a lot of times they don't want to be a part of the team. They just want to give feedback, and they tend to do it at bad times. So I would strongly encourage you not to be a part of this. Preston Odenbrett on Christians in Business asks this: do I need to pay for this? I've spent way too much time tonight dealing with this small issue. As some of you know, I am trying to learn WordPress from a WYSIWYG editor when doing my new website. All I want to do is embed an HTML code. I don't see it anywhere. Do I need to upgrade to premium to do this? Generally speaking, what he's asking about is pretty simple. You just need to make sure you're in the text editor in WordPress as opposed to the visual editor. And that's a tab above where you type stuff in. So you click on the text tab, paste in your code, click back on the WYSIWYG, and you should see what you're used to. Now there are some special exceptions to this. If you are on WordPress.com, so let's say it's mysite.wordpress.com is your URL, or you paid to have mysite.com directed to WordPress.com, all bets are off, because they have a much more limited installation than the one that you can download for free on WordPress.org and install on your own rented server. So keep that in mind. You can't really affect the template or the look of your website as easily on WordPress.com. Even if you pay extra, at least the last time I checked, you could only affect the RSS. You couldn't affect the theme itself. You could choose different themes and then play with their RSS, but you could not start from scratch, or you could not go, oh man, this theme is perfect, except I need to remove this div. Sorry, the div is there. You could do stuff in RSS to make it disappear, but that's harder than just commenting it out. So keep that in mind. Next, Armin Shefley on Google+, the Church Tech group on Google+, asks, looking for an HD video camera that is in the $500 to $1,000 range that would be good for motion shots, roving footage, also has external mic input and hopefully good zoom. Thoughts? Someone suggested a T3i. There's also been discussions of the 50D and the 60D. Here are the limitations. I love my Canon camera. Here is my T3i that I use weekly. I need to make sure that I take that on my long weekend. But anyway, so that's what that is. And I love it. The problem is it can't shoot more than 15 minutes and record it to the card. Battery really isn't an issue. You can get a grip. You can have multiple batteries. You can even have a dedicated power supply like I do. Any of those things are solvable. You're not going to get a smooth zoom with one without a specialized lens that's particularly smooth, because when you're doing stills, you don't care during the motion piece of it. There is a problem with rolling shutter that I need to go back and mention, because when you're doing quick action, it kind of looks wavy. It looks jelly-like. That because he said motion shots and roving footage. Those two, the rolling shutter may be a problem for. If he's looking for a camera to throw on a tripod and use to make small videos, absolutely get a DSLR. Don't get anything lower end than a T2i or a T3i in the Canon line. And there are some good Panasonics and good Nikons that are fine for this. But that's my advice on DSLRs. If you need to record the entire service, more than 15 minutes really, look at a Canon Vixia. The Vixia line is around that price range and they're pretty good for this. So if you're going to use iMag, probably a Vixia is what you want to do. There are ways to get around the limitations of a DSLR, but they become a little problematic because you need to, if you're sticking with HD, which he said at HD, you need to convert the HDMI to SDI. So you need a converter, and you need to power that converter, and before you know it, you've got a bazillion cords hanging off this thing. So on a tripod, that's not a problem, but if it's a moving camera, it becomes more difficult. So there was another discussion that Jason Buckner on the Church Tech Google+, he asked, isn't the term podcast a bit dated and misleading? It's not as if you're making the sermons available to iPod users, except it is. Now, podcasting was never intended to be limited to podcasts, to iPods. But if you are thinking in the 21st century, today, how do people consume audio? They either download it, they stream it. Those are basically the two possibilities. Now, if you want someone to go back to your website every time they want to download the latest sermon, then it doesn't need to be a podcast. What makes it a podcast is the subscription component, the ability to subscribe to it and get it every time there's a new episode. And that's powerful. The people don't have to remember to go to your website every Monday. And if you're late and have it up on Tuesday, they don't arrive a week from Monday and download 2. They get it automatically. And that's the power. Now, if you just want a download link, that's not a podcast. That's just downloadable audio. Same for video. But it's the subscription component that makes it powerful. I admit the word podcast is probably problematic, but right now we don't have a better term. Leo Laporte on Twitter is trying to use netcast, but it hasn't gained wide adoption. What we're talking about now is podcasts, and until someone comes up with a better term, it's just going to be like Icebox, where someone says, hey, I'm going to go to the Icebox, and they don't mean I'm going to go to what's basically an armoire with a big old chunk of ice on one side and my food on the other. They mean I'm going to go to the refrigerator. When you go down to watch TV, you watch your television set, even though the tuner is integrated with the monitor. You see how those things have changed a little, but the name stayed the same because we don't have an alternative. So that's what I'd suggest to him. So I think that's pretty much all the questions that I have. I really hope that this streamed okay because of the problems that I'm seeing on my end. Hopefully I can get this up to... I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so hopefully I can get this up to iTunes and get it embedded and everything before I have to head out for the weekend. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all next week. Until this next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford, Drop me a line with any questions you have. Digitalmedia.com. That's on the screen if you're watching the video. PAUL at trinitydigitalmedia.com. Head over to Twitter. I'm at Paul Allen Cliff. That's PAULALANCLIF. One F, and my Allen is ALAN. And you can absolutely subscribe to the video here on YouTube if you're watching the video. And until next time, go out and change eternity.